Hello, everyone. Welcome back to just another esports podcast. Once again, you're joined by me, your host, Nicholas Shady Bacon, and my co-host, Mr. Kevin Hubris. This past weekend, or 2 weekends ago, we saw the Seattle homestand event, which we'll be giving our recap of with our predictions and kind of the takeaways from that event, as well as diving into our Minnesota homestand predictions. So this is going to be the first kind of, I guess, repeat homestand, even though it's technically not in Minnesota since we are in an epidemic or pandemic, whichever term you want to use. And so that one will be online, unfortunately, as well. But yeah, I think jumping right into it with the Seattle event, the biggest takeaway for me was I think you can pretty much summarize this entire event in one word, and that is honeymoon. The two teams that made it to the finals of the Seattle homestand event both had made a roster change going into the event. You had the London Royal Ravens subbing out Jerd for 0, and you had the Chicago Huntsmen subbing out Gunless for Pristini. So two very interesting changes. You have Jerd, more of an extremely fast SMG player, kind of pairing him up with Dylan. You would think that would work well. However, they take Jerd out for 0, who's a fantastic AR player. And so that's kind of an interesting thing that I think we'll talk about going in, as well as Pristini is definitely a much faster SMG focused player, kind of in comparison to Gunless. So Chicago had, I would say, kind of more so 3 AR kind of style players, and then you had the 2 subs in Scump and Envoy. And now they kind of have 3 kind of sub players, and then you got Formal and Arcides as kind of those AR/flex guys. But yeah, a bunch of interesting roster changes coming into it. The honeymoon teams did extremely well. It'll be interesting to see how long that honeymoon period lasts. And we're seeing a bunch of roster changes with teams, and after the change occurs, it seems to these teams seem to be performing kind of incredibly well at the next event that they're at. And I think some of that I want to contribute that to is we saw it at the beginning of the year. I kind of want to have this be talk about this in kind of a similar aspect to kind of Paris at the start of the season. Paris was an extremely large unknown at the beginning of the season. Everyone had at the bottom of their power rankings because they hadn't really scrimmed them at all. They've been over in Europe pretty much boot camping all the way up until that Minnesota event.
Yep.
And so they were a large unknown, and people weren't able to kind of figure them out until 2 events into the season. And as you can see kind of now, where Paris isn't making it out of groups, they're lucky to get a win in their group. They're struggling, and it's because teams have adapted to understanding how they're kind of playing the game. And so with the honeymoon stage, and I think the honeymoon stage for teams is kind of classified one by yes, players kind of getting new blood into the mix. And so there's not stuff that they're going to be complaining about yet, simply because they're not pushing to be 100% perfect. And when they're pushing to be 100% perfect, that's when they're starting
True.
to nitpick on their teammates, and they find the little things that they find irksome
Yep.
in a sense, as well as when you bring in a new player to a roster and you kind of revamp that roster, your roster becomes an unknown factor. Maps that were bad for you or how you played on certain maps, it's going to be different. And so that's kind of one of the other reasons I think why a lot of these teams, or at least on this weekend, some of these teams that had made a roster change saw so much success, is because they're an unknown to all the other teams. They've been playing them with their other lineup for a couple months now, and they've gotten accustomed to kind of how they played or kind of what they favor in kind of the map set. And so when you bring in these new players, all of that changes, and they have no data on them pretty much. And so they need to kind of rebuild their structure on how to take down the opposition. And so it'll be very interesting to see if these teams stay consistent with these new roster changes, and then so it's not just a honeymoon phase. It's actually, okay, this player did help improve this roster with whatever kind of play style swapping that did occur, whatever kind of team structure change did occur when bringing them in and taking that other player out. Or if it's just, yeah, these teams, they were new, they had a new look, none of the other teams really knew how to play against them because it was a completely unknown. And now they're just going to be able to kind of rebuild their playbook on how to beat them again. And they won't be able to kind of have a repeat performance. So be very interesting kind of moving forward in the season if we kind of do see that, as well as maybe kind of worrying, or maybe not worrying, but it will definitely be interesting to see like if teams kind of realize that okay, if we just make a roster change, yeah, we'll be good for maybe one event, but is it really helping us improve towards the end of the season?
I agree on most parts, right? So there's some cases where you have the kind of the honeymoon phase and everything, and where that surprise as to how the roster is going to operate and role changes, et cetera, are really going to affect the team's ability to perform, and you're not sure how long that change is going to be relevant. At the same time, there's going to be some times where you have a change, like last year whenever United added Simp. I mean, that was just unbelievable, right? And maybe that didn't necessarily have to happen, but when it did, you bring a champs home because of it. So there are times where a honeymoon phase is good, and then there are times where it's just flatly better. And I think in the case of both of these roster changes, I think both of them are flatly better than what they were working with before. Just in my opinion. We'll see. Time will tell. But in my opinion, Zero is definitely a better fit for the team than Jerd, and it showed. And I think that Pristini is one of the best players in CDL, and it was a shame that he wasn't on a roster. So it's nice to see him with a team that's as dominant as the Huntsmen.
Yeah, it's very interesting, especially since you kind of have a tale of two stories here. With the London roster, you had a more AR focused player coming in for the SMG player that Jerd is, and then on the Huntsman, you kind of had the exact opposite. And so you look at the lineup for kind of both of these teams in Chicago now. It's definitely a two AR with one flat, well, formal main AR, and then RC's being that flex player that he is, and then you have the three sub players. Whereas for London, it's a bit more interesting, simply because you have Weskins, who's probably the main AR, would imagine, and then you have probably, I guess, maybe Zero flexing or something along those lines, or maybe Zero is kind of the main AR, or maybe they're moving towards kind of that Minnesota play style where they're kind of focusing more on the two AR styled maps. So it's kind of very interesting how they're setting up their rosters and kind of how they're benefiting from those different kind of aspects of those players. But we'll get, I guess, more into that once we talk about some of their matches. So I
Oh, for
guess
sure.
moving into our first match that we did see, it was the New York Subliners versus the Paris Legion. New York took that in 3-1 fashion, dropping the domination to the Paris Legion. It was their gunrunner domination. Paris has been pretty solid on Gunrunner Dom throughout the entire season. I do believe that's their best domination map. Yeah. So Paris Legion is 7-2 on Gunrunner Dom. They're 8-8 overall in domination. So they have a 7-2 record. That's definitely not the map you want to be playing them on. And so I imagine that was obviously Paris's choice. I doubt New York probably wanted to play them on that unless that's the map that New York is feeling the most comfortable on. In that
I doubt.
case, well, New York doesn't seem to be very comfortable on domination in general. They have been looking better throughout the
True.
weeks since the last event. They went 2-2. This event they went 2-2. They're currently 5-13. So they had a huge beginning of the season losing streak in domination. They're finally starting to get more comfortable. But looking at their domination records, they haven't played St. Petra once. So I don't know if that's their ban or another teams are they're just really good at it, so other teams are banning it against them. They're 1-7 on Gunrunner, so they definitely didn't pick that map. I'm assuming they banned Petrograd and then Paris banned Hackney, so that's why Gunrunner got through. And then they're 4-6 on Hackney Yard, so they definitely want to get Hackney Yard. Their only win, surprisingly, on Gunrunner was in the Minnesota weekend, the first one, and it was against Atlanta. They won that against Atlanta. So crazy kind of little, I guess, tidbit there. But yeah, an incredibly long losing streak in domination. But I think both of us, we did agree, yes, New York was going to take this over Paris. I believe we both said it was going to be a 3-1, which it was. And not too much to really wait. New York versus Paris. That can't be right. What am I looking at? I'm looking at the London box scores. That's why. I'm like, New York doesn't play Paris. They're in the completely other group. What is going on?
That
Okay.
is, oh my gosh.
Why didn't you correct me?
Because I just wanted to see how far you would go with it.
Okay. You were like, yeah, okay, I'll just let him. All right. Yeah, okay. Our first match was Chicago versus Paris. Yes.
Yes,
So it was
Chicago,
Chicago
Paris.
versus Paris.
That sounds right.
They did play Gun Runner Dom, and Paris did win the Gun Runner Dom quite handily. So that point still stands. You don't want to play Paris on Gun Runner Dom. It's by far their best domination match, and they're 50-50 relatively in the hard points. They have been on a bit of a losing streak in the hard points since kind of we've hit that middle of the season where they've been getting figured out, and their S&D has not been looking good either. So Paris is kind of just falling from that 50-50 place down the standings. It'll be actually kind of hilarious if they do end up in 12th place to line up with our predictions by the end of the season, but it'll also be kind of somewhat sad. This series, though, definitely could have gone to a game 5. And the reason I'm saying that is that Hackney hard point. It was a 250 to a 236 for the Chicago Huntsmen. However, Paris tried their damnedest to throw that away, and that they did. They screwed up so many rotations in that game. They
Honestly, it looked like
outplayed.
they threw it. Like I've said that a couple times this season, but that was one that I was like, "Wow, Paris just threw that 100%."
Yeah, it was definitely not a good look for the Paris Legion. We both thought they would end up losing it. Definitely could have gone to a game 5. Chicago looked pretty weak. Actually, both of the teams that made the roster change looked pretty weak on Friday. However, as the tournament went on, they definitely looked better and better. And that kind of is reflective of our next match, which was the London Royal Ravens versus the LA Guerrillas, which went all the way to a game 5. London took the first hard point in convincing fashion. LA Guerrillas took the first S&D in relatively convincing fashion. London Royal Ravens took the domination in, it was somewhat close. Then the LA Guerrillas took the second hard point in convincing fashion. And then finally, the London Royal Ravens took that game 5 in relatively convincing fashion. Both the hard points, the team that won it won by around 100 points. And then both S&Ds, the team that won, they won 6-3. So pretty back and forth series. It seems kind of the teams that the maps that they did pick, they were winning those maps. I'm guessing probably the Gorillas picked Piccadilly, maybe. I'm not sure if that's kind of a Gorilla map or if that's more of a London map. I know it's very sniper heavy, so I honestly wouldn't be surprised
I
if
would
the London Royal Ravens picked that. However, since the first hard point was Gunrunner, I want to say that was probably the Ravens pick and that the Ramazda was potentially the Gorillas. I'm going to check out
I
kind
would
of the
imagine
map.
that is correct because I think that Ramaza has always been more of a LAG map, and it's been kind of the theme of the Gorillas as well to pick things that normally people just don't want to, like flatly don't want to play, like
Yeah.
Ramaza, anything
Yeah,
Ramaza.
looking at the London Royal Ravens, currently they're 2-5 on Ramazda and they're 4-2 on Gunrunner. Obviously, that's including this past weekend where they got 3 Gunrunner hardpoint wins, and then Ramazda they lost 3 times, so they were 2-2 on Ramazda and they were 2-2 on Gunrunner. So honestly, that's kind of just 50-50. Can't really tell too much on kind of who picked what maps in that scenario, but the Run and Roll Ravens came out on top in the end. And I think this event, we actually started to kind of see a lot of life from this LA Guerrillas squad, as we'll see later on. They took down their dreaded demons in the Seattle Surge, and I'll also talk on it that you're to blame for that. But moving on to our third match, which was the Minnesota Rocker versus Optic Gaming. And this is where I pull away in our predictions. We both got the first 2 right. However, in the groups, I had a flawless group prediction. I predicted Minnesota was going to beat OGLA. I said it was going to be a 3-2, and that it was. You said OGLA was going to take it the first time they match up. So you were wrong there. And Again, Minnesota versus Optic Gaming. This series kind of goes one of either way. Either Optic Gaming just dominates Minnesota, or Minnesota plays a really close series and ekes out the win against Optic. And with Optic kind of showing up again at this tournament, we kind of start to have to believe that they're the real deal. But since we've said that kind of a lot of times for some of these teams, and then they start to fall off, or they just have like one good event and then they suck at the next one, kind of your case with Florida.
Right.
I'm not going to say that a team is definitively better now until I see them at 3, potentially 4 events where they put up a good showing. Because if they put up a good showing, make it to the semifinals, make it to a finals, 3 events in a row that they're attending at, then we can definitively say, yes, okay, they are moving up the standings. They are this middle of the pack team now, and not this bottom echelon team that we did have Optic Gaming at.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we will have to give some of these teams a little bit more time. London, perhaps not, because I've always felt like they've just been really close. But and same with Chicago. I mean, I think that those kind of things are solidified, even though they've had like big changes recently. But yeah, anybody who's had a pretty sizable trade or change in their roster recently is yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think that there's enough things going on with like connection issues and those kind of concerns that you have to take into consideration. All right, well, was it like a connectivity thing? Were they just on a bad server at that time? What was hurting them? So I think it'll be. I think you're right. I think it'll take a few events in order for us to really see who does well and who's actually worth snuff.
Yeah. And once again, kind of one standout thing for Minnesota was GodRx had another disappointing performance, I would say, on the week. He overall throughout the weekend, he had a 0.89 KD overall, which is not something we expect from him, and it's not something we've been seeing from him throughout the majority of the season.
No, he definitely had an
Everyone,
off season or off event for sure.
yep.
There's no denying
And
that.
the best player on Minnesota this event was, at least KD wise, which you can put KD in quotations or look at it however you want. I'm just stating overall what their kill to death ratio was, because if you're getting kills on the map,
Right.
that's helping your team out in some aspect definitively. Assault on the team, the only one positive was Assault at a 1.15. Everyone else was below a 1.0. You had Alex at a 0.95, ASIM at a 0.93. That's a good look for ASIM. That's kind of the number you want him around. Obviously, you want everyone above a 1.0, but that's not going to happen for his role and what he does for the team. A 0.93 is extremely good. Where Minnesota struggled this weekend was with GodRx and with Silly. GodRx overall was a 0.89, and Silly was as well. If you have GodRx up in his normal range of a 1.1, 1.2, maybe even 1.3 that he sometimes has on these weekends, this team definitely, I think, would have made it to the finals potentially.
Oh, for
As
sure.
well as you probably need maybe a little bit better of a performance out of Alex. But I think on the weekend, Cillian and Asim, they did their job and they looked damn well doing good, damn well good. They looked good doing it.
They
All right,
look
that's
good.
all I'm gonna say. Yeah, because usually you have Alex, usually you've got our X above a 1.0. If they were above a 1.0 at this event, Minnesota's probably making it to the finals. All right, but moving on, they did take that win over Optics, so they will meet Chicago on Saturday, and we'll get to that matchup in a bit. But our next one was New York Subliners versus the Seattle Surge. And so this one went 3-1 to the New York Subliners over the Surge. One interesting thing from this matchup, though, was we saw for the first time a substitution mid-series. We saw Enable in at the start. We saw Enable in for all the respawns, the hard point, the Dom, and the other hard point, that since it did go to 4 games. And then we saw Pander in for the SMD. And so this is kind of the first time we've actually seen teams make use of the substitution. And it didn't look bad. honestly, Seattle looked really good in the search and destroy, even though they lost it. They had the man advantage. I want to say, honestly, the S&D Seattle should have won 6-1 on Arkloff, which is one of New York's better S&D maps. They threw away so many rounds that it was honestly embarrassing and hard to watch.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I wouldn't call that good then. I mean, I didn't think that Seattle played better, or I think they played better, but I still don't think they're there. You know, I still don't think they're good.
I'm not saying they're good. I'm saying that's an S&D they should have won. And with the substitutions, like I could see where it would work. I could see how it could work. Even though they lost in the hard points, I didn't feel kind of as hopeless with that. And the reason being was because I was looking at the scoreboard and I was kind of looking at how they were playing, and I would look at kind of the kills to deaths, and Enable was getting destroyed, like absolutely stomped
Yeah, I genuinely don't
in
know
those.
if Enable at any point will be CDL ready this season. I just honestly like this game just may not be his, and that's totally fine. What do I think Enable's done? I'm not sure, but that was definitely like this tournament has been. Oh man,
Well,
Enable should not play Call of Duty the rest of the
this
season.
weekend for the Seattle Surge was just abysmal. So the only one positive, once again, was Octane 1.28. Not that difficult when you have 4 players baiting for you. Apathy 0.94. Enable 0.62. So absolutely awful. Karma 0.86. Pander 0.75. And he did play in the LAG series that we'll cover later. And then slacked at a 0.89. And I think running Enable in the respawn game modes is a good idea. I think it's a good idea. I think this team needs that type of player, since obviously they haven't been doing that great with Pander. At the beginning of the season, they looked better with Enable in the respawns for the short amount of time that they did have him. They were only winning dominations, and that's kind of still the only real game mode that they are winning. However, their win to loss ratio in domination was a lot better when they did have Enable on the roster than it was when they had Pander, as well as kind of their overall hard points looked a lot better in my eyes. I would say is kind of like how they were playing the hills and the map in general. And so if Enable didn't do absolute crap this weekend, they honestly probably could have taken some more respawns. And that's going back to one of the points where I saw on Twitter Slack saying they hadn't practiced for 2 weeks. 2 weeks going up into this event. Why the hell are you not practicing for 2 weeks going up into event? And
I couldn't tell you.
the reason they gave was, oh, we were trying to make a roster change, but we couldn't. Okay. So why
Practice?
are you not practicing? It doesn't fucking matter if you're going to make a roster change. You're not wasting anyone's time by still practicing. It literally doesn't matter. Okay, so what do you gain from not practicing? Nothing. You don't gain anything from not practicing. Yeah, you're having a new player come in and that can change some of the team dynamics, obviously, but you literally gain nothing from not practicing. It's not like you're wasting anyone's time. What are you doing if you're not practicing? None of you guys do anything. Octane and Apathy, they make some YouTube videos. Okay, that's a little bit of time. And they also stream. Okay, that's a little bit of time. You guys all do that. But like you literally don't gain anything from an Enable. He's not on an AM team. Pander, he's not on an AM team. You're not wasting anyone's time by practicing. Honestly, it's just fucking lazy on your part.
Yeah, true. I
And
agree.
it's stupid that they even like went on Twitter and said, "Oh, we just didn't practice for 2 weeks." How is that acceptable at this point? Honestly, it's unacceptable in every sense of the word. And I'm just so frustrated at that point. I can understand, okay, we only had 2 weeks to practice with these guys, but they didn't even practice with them. And that's what pisses me off. It doesn't matter if you're going to make a roster change. It doesn't matter if you're going to make a roster change. You still need to put in the effort and practice just in case maybe it doesn't happen, which it didn't in this scenario. But even if it does, you still need to put in that time and effort. You can still gain something from practicing with those players, even if you're going to take them out for a new fifth or whatever you're going to do.
Yeah, imagine not practicing for 2 weeks on something that wasn't a sure thing. Like, imagine. I just, I couldn't tell you. It just blows my mind that this is something that we have to cover. Is professional esports players don't practice. I guess they don't want to win anymore. What's going on? Like it just I don't know. There's money on the line, and there's a lot of money on the line. I mean, the COD Champs prize pool got announced recently, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's millions of dollars on the line.
2 million for first place.
$2 million for first place on the line. Now, if I'm a league owner and I just spent $25 million and I just found out that my my team hasn't been practicing for 2 weeks, I'm gonna find out, if I can pick up a significant amount of new players to put on that team, or a new coach, or something. I am furious at that point. And
Yeah.
any Seattle fan, like you are, should be. I think that there's a lot that needs to be done in Seattle's corner. Enable is obviously not the right answer. You know, Pander I still don't believe is the right answer. Slacked is not performing. It's just it's just a mess. Honestly, the fact that they've only gotten wins against the worst team in CDL, it's just like puts them in the second to worst team in CDL range. So,
After this weekend, the Seattle Surge is definitively the worst team in the CDL. I can
oh,
say
for
that
sure.
with 100% certainty, without a shadow of doubt. The Seattle Surge are the worst team in the CDL. And they shouldn't be. And they shouldn't be. But not practicing, and what's even more annoying and amazing with that is how often do you see on Twitter substitutes saying, "Man, we just can't get real practice. Like I want to play for the team, but I just can't get in for practice. We can't play in the amateur bracket because we're a sub." Like this is your chance. You can play with the team. You can practice with the team.
Yeah,
Take
right.
advantage of that opportunity. Like I can't believe they just wasted 2 weeks, and it's like, what are you do? What are you even doing? And I'm gonna even be more dumbfounded. And this probably did happen, but you probably had some of those players on the Seattle Surge go and play tens. So you're saying you're gonna go play with a bunch of random other players that you're 100% not getting on your roster, but you won't practice with players that are still options for you.
It blows my mind, truly.
Unbelievable. All right, we're going to move on to our Chicago versus Minnesota matchup. Both of us predicted Chicago would take this over their opposition, I do believe. If I go to our predictions, I had Chicago versus Minnesota. You had Chicago versus OG. We both thought Chicago would walk away with this in 3-2 fashion. However, Chicago seems to be a bit of Minnesota's kryptonite. Once again, they take the series 3-0 over Minnesota. It was a close series again, as it has been. The domination, not the domination, excuse me, the hard point on Azir cave. Chicago won 250 to 233. Extremely close. Gunrunner S&D went to Chicago 6-5. Extremely close, the closer you can get in S&D. Heckney
Yeah.
Dom was not that close. That was a 176 to a 123.
And
All
watching
right.
that, it felt not close at all. Maybe in the first half, but definitely not in the second half.
Yeah, that was a bit of a rough one for the Minnesota Rocker. However, the other two maps, extremely close, definitely could have gone either way. But Minnesota, I think they just kind of need to figure something out against Chicago since they haven't been really able. I don't think they've taken a map off Chicago, have they? They've had to have taken one. This is probably their third time that they've matched up. If I'm going to go and check the matchups real quick. Yeah, okay. Yep, they did take a map off of Chicago at the beginning of the season, but since then they've only lost all their maps to Chicago. So I think they're probably 1-9 map count against Chicago. So that's definitely something that they're going to want to look to improve in the preceding weeks and the preceding events. Moving on to our series after that, it was the London Royal Ravens versus the New York Subliners. And this is where, unfortunately, I bow out of the perfect bracket. I got it wrong. I said New York was going to take it over London 3-1. However, at that time, okay, so when we did give our predictions prior to this event, we didn't know Gunless was out for Pristini, and we didn't know Jerd was out for Zero.
Yeah,
So
that is
those
true.
are two big changes. Even with those changes, I probably would have stayed the same with my predictions. I might have said, okay, New York 3-2 over London, but I don't think I would have given it to London over New York. However, London decided they were here to play, and they took a swift 3-0 over the New York Subliners. And none of it was really that close. The Gunrunner hardpoint was a 250 to a 180, so that's a 70-point win for the Ravens. The Gunrunner domination was a 156 to a 138, and then the Gunrunner S&D was a 6-3. So triple Gunrunner for the London Royal Ravens in their 3-0 over the New York Subliners. So maybe we don't give them Gunrunner in a series. That's seeming to be kind of the
Probably
takeaway
not.
here. But yeah, they're just like, oh yeah, okay, what's the S&D? Oh, it's Gunrunner again. Okay, maybe we'll see another map in this set. Oh, what's the domination Gunrunner? Damn it! All right, okay. Guess we
Yeah,
aren't going to see a different map. Unlucky.
that is weird too. Thinking that like I'm really not sure what the bans were, like the strategy behind that. But I mean, you'd think that London probably got map one, and they were like, "All right, cool, it's Gunrunner." That's
Yeah, I
got
think this is the unlucky thing in this New York-London matchup is New York has been wanting to play Arcloth Peak pretty much for all of their S&Ds. The unfortunate thing is that London Royal Ravens is probably one of the best Arklov S&D teams in the game, if not the best Arklov S&D team in the game, simply because of the pressure and precision of Wuskin's sniper.
yeah. He's definitely a force to be reckoned with every time he picks up that sniper rifle. I mean, embarrasses the likes of Simp. Well, I wouldn't say embarrasses. Goes toe to toe with the likes of Simp. Embarrasses most others. Does well against Dashy. I mean, he's obviously probably top three sniper in the game right now. And
Yeah,
Arklov is one of those games or one of those maps that greatly favors a strong sniper.
yeah. Arklov and Piccadilly are definitely kind of probably
Both of those,
the,
yes.
the two most sniper-heavy maps, and then you can take one out on St. Petrograd, as well as sometimes on Gunrunner. The only one where you're not really seeing a sniper ever, I believe, is Ramazda. But yeah, the London Royal Ravens extremely scary in S&D this weekend. They went 5-1 overall in their S&D. The only S&D they lost was to the LA Gorillas in that first S&D on Piccadilly. So, and the most rounds anyone got off of the London Royal Ravens in an S&D was 3. So, if the London Royal Ravens were winning in S&D, they were winning 6-3 or better,
Yeah,
which is quite scary.
they definitely looked lights out this weekend in S&D. I think that they are probably challenging Empire and Atlanta as far as being the best S&D teams go. I think that this tournament was exactly what London needed in order to remain in that kind of like higher tier of teams. I think they're still kind of in the middle of the pack. They're going to have to do a little bit more as far as, event success goes from here on
Yeah.
out. But, I mean, their search and destroy is not unmatched, but definitely something to be scared of.
Yeah, I think the London Royal Ravens, while they definitely looked good at this event, they're definitely going to need to kind of show the same performance at this one at the next couple events if we're going to want to definitively move them up the standings in any way, shape, or form. But moving on to our next matchup, it was Optic Gaming LA versus the Paris Legion. And once again, Optic take that in 3-1 fashion over the Paris Legion. Paris Legion took that first hard point over Optic Gaming, and they also almost took the second hard point against Optic Gaming. A bit unlucky, I would say. Honestly, Paris Legion probably could have, should have potentially won that second hard point. It was 240 to 250 for Mazda. But I don't want to say definitively that Paris got screwed over by spawns, but watching some of kind of the spawn points and where teams were spawning a little bit more closely this weekend than I maybe had in the past,
Oh
Teams
yeah.
are getting very unfortunate in where some of these teams are spawning. They honestly
Well,
kind of get blessed
you
sometimes.
see where Seth got spawned or Scump got spawned? Like that was unbelievable. That was honestly a spawn from the gods.
Which map, which series?
Hackney. It was on a P2. I think it was against Minnesota. Minnesota or Oh gosh.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
don't remember.
I
I don't
believe it was
remember
Minnesota.
that one. All I remember is when Optic Gaming was playing. I don't know if it was against Paris. I do think it was against Paris simply because this Ramasa hardpoint was so close, where Paris pretty much had control of the barbershop hill, and for some reason, Optic Gaming just starts spawning in the back. And so as soon as they start getting that close spawn in the back, that hill's pretty much chalked. You're not really going to be getting any time on that
Right.
simply because the other team spawns so damn close. It's kind of pointless at that point. You kind of just got to full rotate to next. So, bit unfortunate. Paris has been looking like decent against Optic, where it looks like they'll almost take it to a game 5, but then something just happens and they aren't able to take that game 4 hard point and push it all the way to a game 5, which is a little bit unfortunate, but Optic's just the better team right now. People have started to figure out Paris, and this is where we're going to see Paris exit this homestand and kind of once again, it's not even that their stats were bad. Actually, looking at kind of their stats across the board, they were pretty good. I mean, you had Dens overall at a 1.15, you had Luca at a 1.2, you had Shocks at a 1.07, Zad at a 0.85, and Kismet at a 0.93. So I think, honestly, Paris was slaying this event. It wasn't their skill, it was their strategy that
Yeah,
cost
true.
them this event. And I think that's something that they can fix in that moving into kind of the next homestand. I don't think they're at the next one. I would be slightly surprised if they were. Let me check real quick. Minnesota is the next one. No, Paris is not at the next one, so we won't be seeing them at that. But hopefully that is something that they can fix moving forward so that they're back into that kind of competitive standing where we don't know who will take it. But moving on to one where it was definitely a surprise. It was the Los Angeles Guerrillas versus the Seattle Surge. And the cow that was getting milked, which was the Guerrillas, decided it had had enough of Seattle's grimy hands on their udders and gave them a nice swift hind kick to the face and knocked them right out of their homestand in 3-1 fashion. And the reason you're to blame for this is because this was the first time you took Seattle over the Guerrillas. You said Seattle was going to 3-0 the LA Guerrillas.
And what did I say in
And
that too?
they didn't. They
No,
didn't.
what did I
They
say in that?
lost
I
3-1.
said that I picked him solely because this was the only way that LA was going to get the monkey off their shoulder or monkey off their back about losing to Seattle every single time is if I picked them right then and there.
Yep.
And guess what? It happened.
And I hate you for it. All the Seattle fans hate you for it. You're a piece of crap, but I got to live with you. So, unfortunately, I guess the Gorillas take it over the Seattle Surge. Props to the Gorillas. It was a blowout in the S&D. No clue why Seattle went Piccadilly Surge. That's very interesting to me as why they went Piccadilly Surge. I believe that's the first time they've ever played Piccadilly Surge. Yeah, that was the first time they ever played Piccadilly Surge, and that should probably be the last time they ever played Piccadilly Surge since they lost that 6-1. So it was not close at all. And honestly, they looked pretty lost on that map. Again, they take the domination. That's kind of the only glimmer of hope for Seattle Surge is that they're still able to take dominations. But outside of that, what can he say? They didn't practice for 2 weeks, so it's to be expected.
Yeah, for
Not
sure.
think we harped on that enough. Congratulations to the LA Guerrillas. You had a close series against London. You beat Seattle. And now you're moving on. You got at least 10 points there, so that's a pretty good weekend for you guys, I'd say. Our next losers round 2, this is to qualify for the semifinals. We saw the likes of Optic Gaming LA take on the Minnesota Rocker in their rematch. And for the rematch, this is where I said, you know what? Minnesota takes it the first time. They're not going to take it the second time. OGLA is going to take it the second time. You had the opposite. So I got the switcheroo right. I got that perfectly. So far, the only things I've gotten wrong was London, New York, Seattle Gorillas, which honestly, who the heck could have predicted that one?
I did. Not
You
really.
didn't, no, because you said Seattle was.
I said
You're,
I was
you're
going to
still
reverse
wrong.
psychology the bracket.
You're still wrong.
I said it in the podcast. You
You
can
can
go back.
take
You can
that
go back and
dub, but
watch
you
the
take
other.
the loss in the bracket. Either way, I beat you in these predictions. That's what I got wrong. Yeah, OGLA, they 3-0 Minnesota, though, in their rematch. They 3-0 Minnesota in their rematch. And so this time, they didn't complain about connection. And honestly, if I see OGLA bitch about connections one more time, I'm actually going to lose full, since that is what they did when they lost to the Minnesota Rocker in their incredibly close Friday match to start off the weekend. Yes, okay, whatever, 120 ping, whatever that may be. I'm pretty sure I play at 120 ping and I don't throw nades at boxes and die to them. But everyone's playing online. Everyone's going to have some type of connection issue at some point in the game. Like, you can't just say, oh, it's only us. We're the only ones experiencing a connection issue here or there. And maybe there was just like a lag spike or something at that point. I don't know. All that I know is that everyone is dealing with this. Everyone. So shut up and play the game,
Yeah, I agree.
please. Like, that's all I ask. It's not the reason you're losing every single series. Congratulations to Optic, the 3-0 Minnesota, and then we'll move on to our final Saturday match that did occur, where we saw the New York Subliners take on the LA Gorillas. The LA Gorillas, once again, they take the S&D. Did the LA Gorillas? No, the LA Gorillas didn't go undefeated in S&D this weekend. However, they did go 3-1. The only S&D they lost was that game 5 S&D to the London Royal Ravens. That's the only S&D they lost this weekend. So S&D definitely looking better it's been looking good for the LA Gorillas kind of throughout the whole season. Honestly, they really just need to improve their hard point and their domination. Their domination, they went 0-3 this weekend, and their hard point, they actually went 50-50. They went 3-3 in their hard points this weekend. So definitely looking a bit better. And I think that was kind of on a lot of the hard point wins were on the back of Vivid, who had a pretty disgusting weekend, to be honest. He went like 44 and like 29 on one of the Ramazdas. And then I think in another series, he was like plus 12 again. So Vivid definitely had a very strong weekend overall, kind of in some of those respawns.
Yeah,
However, I don't
I
think
was pretty impressed with him.
his KD reflects that if we look at his overall. Yeah, his overall KD, he's actually at a 0.98 for the weekend, which is surprising since he did have some very dominant performances in the hard point. Kind of the one person that seemed to be costing this Gorillas roster was Spart, who was at a 0.17, the second worst KD overall for the weekend. Everyone else on the team was above a 1.0. You had Aqua at a 1.02, you had Blast at a 1.08, and then you had Decimate at a 1.13. So Gorillas
I'm.
looked
They're
pretty
looking.
good this event.
They're looking better, but they're still not where they need to be.
Definitely not still what they need to be. I think some of it has to do, since you see there the KDs are there, but I still don't think they know kind of how to play appropriately. And I do think that they're still kind of lacking a lot of in-game leadership for that roster, since none of the players on there have ever really been a definitive leader. And then you also have two rookies kind of in the mix. So, but
Which isn't to say that rookies can't be leaders.
no,
It's more of a like, you
you
know.
definitely have rookies that can be leaders, but if it's kind of like a two-way street. I mean, you had Simp come into United. I don't want to say he was a leader on that team, but he was definitely extremely vocal. And that's kind of some of the leadership that you may need depending on kind of the structure of the team and kind of how they work inside of the game, how they kind of communicate and everything. And a lot of the rookies, yeah, they can be a leader potentially because maybe they led their AM team before they got picked up or something along those lines. I think the difficulty in kind of the leadership role when they come into a pro team is, are these established pros going to be willing to listen to this young guy that just came into the team? Are they going to be there to kind of and coach them? It's more so, is the communication a two-way street, or is it kind of just a one-way street once they get picked up into the roster?
Like I said, I think that LA still has so many things to work on, and the fact that they beat Seattle.
They beat an unpracticed Seattle, and they looked decent against London Royal Ravens in kind of the first match that London played, but
I don't know.
that was probably just some opening weekend jitters for the new London Royal Ravens roster, since they hadn't played a competitive game with that team. As we kind of also saw that same thing with Chicago. They didn't look amazing against Paris. Their series definitely could have and probably should have gone to a game 5.
I agree.
And so, yeah, I definitely don't think Gorillas is not a bottom of the pack team. Just saying, this weekend they didn't look as bad.
Yeah, they
as
didn't look
have.
as bad. They weren't terrible, but they weren't
They
great.
looked like there was at least some hope for this team to do something. I think is kind of like what I want to say. Not
Yeah,
move out of the bottom of the pack, but at least beat some of those bottom of the pack teams up a bit.
like I said, it's hard to tell. We will see as time goes, but I don't have a whole lot of faith in LA. I don't have a whole lot of faith in Seattle, honestly, especially after, this turnout, and who knows what the future is going to hold for them. It's about time to just get your final roster, make minimal changes, work on the actual gameplay and the strategy, and who's doing what, rather than working on, all right, we need to make a significant personnel change because there's something like seriously wrong. So, and I think in the case of both in Gunless, I think there was a case that yes, there was something wrong. I would imagine that Jared, there was something going on with him. But at this point, you need to find your roster and you need to, grab it and get a hang of what the game is, or how the game's played. So, and I think LA is getting there. We might see some sort of like Toronto-esque resurgence here in a bit.
I don't think we'll see that. I think what I'm saying from this weekend, when I said I saw like some hope for this team, I'm not saying they're going to move out of 10th through 12th. I think they're definitively going to stay there. The question is maybe, okay, they can move to that 10th spot. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, but a 10th spot doesn't win a championship.
No, it doesn't win a championship. I'm not saying they're anywhere close to a championship. They're not winning a championship. I can say that with 100% certainty right now. The LA Gorillas are not going to win COD champs.
That's recorded. That is going to be on a video.
You can record it, timestamp it, save it. But yeah, the Gorillas aren't winning COD champs. I'm just saying, okay, maybe they'll get some money at the end of the season instead of end up in 11th/12th, where the Seattle Surge are looking like they're going to end up with $0 in their pocket at the end of the day.
And that's gotta hurt. That's gotta hurt as a league owner. You toss down 25 million, and I'm sure that you're making money other ways, but nobody wants to buy like LA Gorillas stuff. Nobody wants to buy. Well, there are crazy guys who want karma stuff for Seattle.
Well, no, the Seattle Surge stuff at least looks good. You're not buying it for the team. The team's ass right now. You're buying it because it looks good. The Seattle Surge merch looks good. They have one of the best logos in the league. They have a pretty darn good color scheme, I think. The Gorilla is literally budget purple Spider-Man, and it looks awful. It looks so bad. No one's buying Gorilla's merch. At least, okay, some people are, and I'm sorry for ragging on you, but it's not my cup of tea.
I'm not
That's
sorry.
what I'll say. I'm definitely, I would rather, I'm not buying anyone's merch because I don't have the money to, but if I did have the money to, I'd buy Seattle Surge merch over Gorilla's merch.
I think that's the point though, is that LA really doesn't have anything going for them at this point. And to be a league owner who just spent 25 million getting your team invested and to really just not do a whole lot and just remain really mediocre through the whole season is that's got to be depressing, right? Like that's got to be disheartening. I mean, yeah, they beat Seattle finally, but I mean, it's I don't know. I don't see them. I don't see them in the top 10 finish. I don't see them doing really much of anything until they get I don't know more events under their belt.
I think the Gorillas just need to rebrand and then get like a really good looking logo, and then maybe I'll like them some more.
100 Thieves, maybe 100 Thieves. Get a LA 100 Thieves team.
Yeah, you know what? Can franchises rebrand to something? How often does that happen in sports? I can't remember.
I mean,
I
this is
mean, I
early on
guess
too, so like
yeah, but I'm just trying to think of how often it happens in sports and like if they'll allow it because I know that's kind of what they're trying to structure a lot of this off of.
true.
I think the only one that I can think of is like maybe when the Browns became the Ravens or whatnot, but
But that's the
that was
thing.
kind of something different.
It happened so long ago. That's the thing. It was during the beginning of league foundations whenever these things happen. So I would imagine that there's probably going to be some change ups from last season to this season. Look at the Overwatch league. You know, plenty of changes there from
Yeah.
the seasons that it's existed, and I think that I mean I don't think that this is an exact mirror of the Overwatch league, but they've tried to structure it as much as possible with it. So I think that it's important to say that you will be seeing differences and changes from from this season to next season, and I wouldn't be surprised if LA was one of those teams that was like, yeah, we're not really making a whole lot of money doing this right now. Maybe we need to change some things up. So I think as a whole, the organization needs to just change a lot up, and I don't really see them, doing that right now. I don't think they have the liberty to do that right now. We'll see. I mean, $2 million is on the line, so
Moving on to our Sunday matchup, our first one, we saw the likes of the Chicago Huntsmen take on the New York Subliners. And so I said not the New York Huntsmen, that's not a team. I said the New York Subliners were the best team at the Florida homestand event. I don't think I can say that for this event. However, I think I can say they were the second best team at this event. And that's simply going,
really,
not the second best, third best team.
I was
I'm
about to
sorry.
say.
Yeah, I said they were the second best team at Florida, and then I'm like, I'm not going to say that about them at this event. They're the second best team at this event. That would have been no. They were the third best team at this event. I think London was definitively second. Chicago was obviously first. I think the New York Subliners were the third best team at this event over Optic Gaming, and they lose. They lose to the Huntsmen. They lost to London. Those are the only teams they lost to during this event, and so that's one of the reasons you can say, yeah, okay, New York was the third best team at this event. And it's also somewhat going off of their stat line, which when you look at this, you're like, how the heck did they not win this event? Because like you look at their overall KDs and you look at that and you're like, if you just showed someone the KDs from this event for the New York Subliners, you'd be like, okay, that team won this event. They had accuracy at a 1.04, attach at a 1.10, Mac at a 1.19, Zuma at a 1.05, and temp at a 0.99. So pretty much everyone was above a 1.0 or even. If you take the average of that, their average team KD was a 1.07. The team that won the event, the Chicago Huntsmen, their average KD was a 1.04. You had accuracies at a 1.08. You had Envoy at a 1.04. Formal doing really well at a 1.22. Scump at a 1.0. And then Pristini at a 0.84. And so I think some of that you can probably contribute to Chicago had a couple maps where they had really poor performances, specifically Arcides and Pristini. There was one map where I think both of them went double negative. I believe that actually might have been the series against the New York Subliners in the domination, if I'm not.
Yes.
I believe that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, they did not do well. So I
Yeah. So, yeah, in that domination, you had Arcides he was 13 kills, 25 deaths, and then Pristini who, oh boy, Pristini was 10-27.
Yeah,
So
it was not a good
that
game.
that's probably where some of that falls off, as well as kind of Chicago's slow start on the Friday. New York didn't really have a slow start throughout the event. They kind of just showed up and performed. But I think one more event that we see New York at, and they make it to a semifinal, or maybe they make it to a final, I think we can definitively say, yes, okay, New York's probably in that Minnesota echelon, that Minnesota tier.
Yeah, Minnesota London echelon. I agree. I think that New York has definitely hit stride with old Mac Melts. I think that he has been exactly what this team's needed. They are some consistency issues and some domination play away from being one of those teams that is a top tier team, and they could very easily get there by the end of the season. I remember, whenever we did our power rankings and everything, I didn't feel good at all about New York. I just thought that they were, terrible. And I thought that they needed to make significant changes, and they didn't necessarily need to make a ton of changes. But Mac was definitely a huge help, and going to online definitely helped with New York as well. But I agree with you. I think that New York is another like semifinals or a finals appearance away from being that in that kind of Minnesota London sort of esteem. So
Yep. They've recently moved up into a positive win to loss ratio in their hard points. They're now 16-15 in their hard points. S&D still struggling a bit there. They're 9-13 in that. They have not won a single Gunrunner S&D, and they haven't won a single Piccadilly S&D. They're 4-1 on Ramazda, and they're 3-1 on St. Petrograd. So those are looking like they're better maps. And this is actually a somewhat sad statistic for them. They have the second worst overall round win to loss percentage out of every team in the CDL. The only team with a worse round win to loss percentage is the Seattle Surge at a 41.15 win to loss percentage in rounds. New York is at a solid even 43 round win to loss percentage. So definitely not a stat you want to see from them. They're going 50-50 now in the dominations. They're starting to pick that up. It's just that Gunrunner Dom is looking really ugly. They haven't played St. Petrograd once. They need to get another solid Dom map into their pool. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to move out of the middle to middle upper tiers. They're not going to be able to move out of that range until they get a second Dom map that they're good at. They can't rely on getting Hackney Yard, because if that's the only map that they're decent at, they have a 4-6 record in that. If that's the only map they're decent at, teams can just ban that, and then
yep.
they only got two other options to play: St. Petrograd, which they haven't played once, so they've probably been banning that, and then Gunrunner, which they're 1-7 on. So that's they need to pick up one of those two maps, and they need to get a lot better at them so that they have more flexibility in their map set.
The
But outside
Gunrunner
of that,
Dom has been so pivotal and has been honestly one of the most fun dominations to watch because it goes so fast. People are all over the map on it. You can watch hill changes left and right nonstop. Hackney's like that as well, but Gunrunner is the one where you like it separates the boys from the men. And New York would do best if they would just focus on getting to the same level as these high tier teams at Gunrunner Dom, because if they get there, then they can beat everybody else in the field. If they can compete with the likes of Chicago, Dallas, and Atlanta on Gunrunner Dom, then they can push themselves into like they can push themselves out of this hole where they are a subpar domination team. I think if they were to focus on one, that would be the one to focus on.
yeah. And New York's hardpoint actually didn't look as stellar this weekend as it had in the past. Honestly, some kind of the strategies that you had seen out of New York's hardpoint, where you saw like extremely early rotations or people playing kind of like these odd angles to catch other players maybe making that rotation as well to try and get to the hill. You didn't really see that as much in kind of the hard points that you saw New York play this weekend. And so I don't know if that was maybe some like disrespect of saying, okay, we can just beat these teams in straight up gunfights and we don't need to pull out kind of the strat that we did against Atlanta FaZe or kind of what was happening in those hard points, but it definitely wasn't looking as solid as it had at the past events that we had seen this New York lineup at. And so I'm hoping that that was just something about this weekend and we aren't going to see kind of a collapse in their structure. But congratulations, Chicago. They take that over New York. They move on to the finals where they will meet the London Royal Ravens. As in our other semifinal, we saw the London Royal Ravens match up against Optic Gaming, maybe in a bit of a grudge match, you could say, since it was Optic Gaming that knocked the London Royal Ravens out of the Florida homestand.
True.
If you remember that just a couple weekends ago. And this one looked very good for the London Royal Ravens. The Gunrunner Hardpoint, which that I believe is like the third time they played it this weekend. They won that again. They went 250 to 193. That Optic Gaming, they've only really played Arklov S&D. It seems that definitely seems to be Optic's favorite S&D map. However, London Royal Ravens undefeated on Arklov Peak S&D this weekend, 5-1 overall in that game mode this weekend. So crushed that, and that was Optic's pick. So that's kind of worrying for them. St. Petrograd Dom, London Royal Ravens' weakest game mode is definitely kind of seemed to be their domination. If they pick that up, then they're definitely looking to be a very solid, maybe not top team, but like up in that Chicago area if they're able to get better at their domination. Optic Gaming's looking like a pretty good Dom team, though. They've had a bunch of pretty darn good performances in that over the past couple events. But their Mazda Hardpoint, that was a 250 to a 244. And this was another one where I feel like Optic got some pretty lucky spawns. It was also kind of like, London, how are you guys not win this? Holy crap.
Right.
Oh, these Ramasa Hardpoints are giving me a heart attack because it's like, dude, you get that construction hill and you get some points on that, but you aren't able to close it out. And then all of a sudden it goes P5 and then you're like, oh gosh. And then it didn't even end there. It actually went all the way back to P1. And honestly, I have no clue how London lost this because Shawnee went huge in that last P1 rotation.
Oh, yeah, for
He
sure.
got like 3 kills. How is Optic able to get enough bodies back to the hill in time to flood it and get like, I believe they needed something around like 30 points off of that hill to win. And they didn't get all 30 because they got close. I think they only need like 2 seconds more, but they had TJ rotate over because London needed to contest all that time against Optic. Otherwise, Optic would have won off of that hill. But it's like, how is Optic able to get like all these bodies there so quickly? I need to probably go back and watch where they spawn, but that to me is just absurd. When you have a guy that got 3 kills in that hard point, Optic's still in the other hard point across the map, so you know at least one player is there, probably rotating a bit later. So they only have one other guy. Like, how does that get broken? Like, that's just absurd. But London was able to clutch up and just decimate Optic and the Gunrunner S&D. They won that convincingly 6-1. So Optic Gaming looking like maybe they can only do well on Arklov Peak S&D, potentially, maybe, who knows. They played a couple of they played Petro, Ramazda, Gunrunner, and then 3 Arklov Peaks this weekend. They were 3-3 in their search and destroy, but their Arklov's definitely their best one. They're 0-3 Gunrunner, 0-2 Piccadilly, 0-0 St. Petrograd. They're 3-3 on Ramazda, and their Arklov Peak, they're 6-5. So 2 of those losses came from this weekend. One against Minnesota in that round 11, and then one against the London Royal Ravens. But their Arklov Peak's definitely looking like their best S&D map. However, we haven't really seen any good S&Ds from them besides that one, outside of Slasher clutching up a bunch and kind of search and destroy. And that's kind of one of the biggest changes we're seeing with this Optic Gaming roster. It's not even that everyone's doing that spectacular. It's just that Slasher's kind of backpacking them across the finish line to these semifinals.
True.
In all honesty, I mean, you had Slasher this weekend. He had the highest KD out of every player, and we're talking Octane was here this weekend. So, and he has 4 players baiting for him. So that's pretty impressive that Slasher had a better KD than Octane throughout the weekend. He also had the highest true engagement excess. Actually, he didn't have the highest true engagement excess.
No, I think that
was
was
Assault.
Assault,
pretty
yeah.
impressively. Yeah, to 64.8. That's pretty damn crazy. But yeah, Slasher overall this weekend was at a 1.34 KD. You had Kenny even at a 1, and then everyone else was a below a 1.0. You had Chino doing better this weekend. He was a 0.84. It's not bad. And then you had Dashy and TJ both at a 0.91. So
Oh,
this Optic Gaming roster, it's not. I don't know if it's just maybe Slasher stealing all those kills or kind of what's happening. Because like it's like, okay, if Slasher gets less kills, then obviously those kills are probably going to be distributed to other players on the team. And I don't think Slasher's ever really one to like kind of underperform. It's mostly you kind of look at TJ as the one that's going to be the guy that's a bit inconsistent. But if you have a weekend where TJ's on,
yeah.
and then Slasher's putting up this kind of performance, this Optic Gaming roster is looking like they're going to be incredibly scary. It's just going to be interesting to see if they want to stick with Chino, if they're going to make a play for maybe Gunless or some other player that is available, maybe like an Enable or someone. It should be very interesting to kind of see what they decide to do, since they have had some marginal success with Chino in the lineup.
I think it's just better than JCap. One.
Yeah, I think you could say pretty much anything would be better than JCap.
Um,
No,
I,
not to like shit on JCap, but
no, I mean, like it's definitely Optic has made semifinal after semifinal at this point, and I think that the roster change was big for it. And I don't even think Chino's been that great. I also
no, he
don't think
hasn't.
that Chino's playing his position. I think he's much better with an AR in his hand, and he's had to be running an MP5 just because that's how MP5s are going to run for now, pending GAs that are in the talks. So I think that's part of Optic's problem. I think TJ Haley, like his performance dictates how this Optic roster is going to go every single time, because he can be one of the best players at the event or he can be just mediocre. And it totally just depends on I don't even know. It's always been a consistency issue with him. Even last year during Black Ops 4 was always a consistency issue with him. And I don't know if that's what you want in a Call of Duty player. But I still think that Optic is going in the right direction, and for those Green Wall fans, you could definitely see them breaching into that, like, not top tier, but definitely the Minnesota, London sort of area with this kind of performance from here on out.
Moving on to our finals for the Seattle homestand event, we saw the two honeymoon teams. We saw the London Royal Ravens match up against the Chicago Huntsmen. Chicago Huntsmen did take that in 3-1 fashion over the London Royal Ravens. Definitely could have gone to a game 5. That gun runner domination, Chicago was just barely able to hold on to lead, a 155 to a 154. So
Oh my
incredibly
gosh,
close
that was
map
insanity.
there. London Royal Ravens took a convincing 6-2 Arklov S&D over the Huntsmen. So it was Gunrunner S&D, and London Royal Ravens decimated Optic Gaming on Gunrunner S&D just the match prior. So it would have been very interesting to kind of see what would have been the outcome if that had gone to that game 5. Obviously, Chicago looked fine on Gunrunner. They hadn't looked bad. They haven't looked bad in S&D kind of at all. They're currently 16-8 in S&D. Gunrunner, they're 5-2 on. They did play Gunrunner twice that weekend. They had won it both times prior. They won it against Minnesota, and that was a 6-5, so that was pretty close. But then
Right.
the match against New York, New York's been somewhat struggling in S&D. They won that 6-3. So if this had honestly gone to a game 5, London probably would have taken it, to be honest, with how they had looked in just looking at kind of that match prior on the Gunrunner and how badly they destroyed Optic. Maybe there was some lag issues in that matchup for Chicago, or not for Chicago, for Optic, since we did see that was the one where we did see that TJ nade, but who knows? Just kind of speculating at this point. But yeah, and yeah, this weekend, Chicago, they went 7-0 in hardpoint. They didn't lose a single hardpoint this entire weekend, and that's scary. because if they're going 7-0 in hard points, and they have an overall record of 16-8 in S&D, and then their domination, they're above 50-50, and they're currently 13-7 in that. This is looking like a very, very scary team. I'm going to be very excited to see if this new Chicago Huntsmen lineup, how they stack up against the likes of the Dallas Empire, and if we ever see the matchup against the Atlanta FaZe, since we haven't seen it yet. But should be very exciting if we do see those matchups. Could also be somewhat disappointing if maybe this was just the honeymoon for Optic, or not for Optic, excuse me, for Chicago. And I think this is probably a better lineup for Chicago. You think, oh, Pristini is definitely not as good of a player as Gunless is, but I think it has something to kind of do with more of this, the way this game is structured. You're going to want 3 solid SMG players instead of a flex person that's more comfortable. I would say Gunless is definitely more comfortable with an AR than he is with an SMG. That's more comfortable with an AR flexing an SMG. You'd rather have 3 solid sub players that are definitively sub players and then one guy flexing and then
Yeah.
an AR. And that makes sense for Chicago. However, you look at the other side of it and you look at London, which they got rid of a sub player, so they don't. Honestly, you look at London, you're like, don't they kind of have 4 not 4 flexes? They have Dylan, who's a definitive sub. Then you have Shawnee, who's, I would say, a flex, but prefers the AR. You have Wuskins, who I guess is the main AR. You have Zero, who I guess is kind of flexing, but I would say prefers an AR. And then you have Scraps, who is a flex, probably prefers the sub, but kind of very interesting lineup. I mean, you did have Zero running the SOG in Black Ops 4. He was being forced to run the sub for a decent amount of time in kind of some of the past titles. And the MP5 definitely isn't really like a sub. It's
No,
more of
it's
like
a
an
god gun.
AR.
It's like a
Yeah,
god gun.
do
It
it,
does it
do it,
all.
do it. Does everything. It's more of like the FAMAS, I guess, from Black Ops 1.
One, yeah. Gun
But
was stupid. Yeah,
kind of a very,
this gun's
very
filthy.
interesting switch for the London Royal Ravens. And I think the reason why this works, I think kind of looking at the roster now and looking at the success they've had, maybe a lot of the issue was somewhat of maybe a pacing issue between Dylan and Jerd and kind of how those guys were mixing. Because you think, okay, yeah, we got 2 really, really good aggressive subs that are going to go in really fast, shoot everyone up, and we'll get the trades. That didn't seem to be like kind of what happened. You never really did have that Dylan Jerd dynamic duo type of thing that you do have with some of these kind of other SMG duo rosters. It didn't seem like they really meshed that well together. And I mean, you look at this weekend, Dylan was at a 1.01. And so he was definitely a lot better than he had been at pretty much the entire season. The best player on this team this weekend, KD wise, was Zero. It wasn't Wuskins. And so I think teams are kind of starting to realize that you can't play the game and you can't have kind of this division of kills and deaths on your team that mirror the Octane play style. And I'm
Yeah.
categorizing it that because it happens every event with Octane, where he's vastly positive and everyone else on his team is vastly negative. And that was something that London Royal Ravens had. They had Wuskins, who was vastly positive, and everyone else on the team was vastly or primarily negative. And now you see a much more even split of kills and deaths on the team. Dylan at a 1.1, Scraps at a 0.99, Wuskins at a 1.03, Zero at a 1.05, and then Shawnee at a 0.88. You have this is the first event where you've had a clear division, a very even division of kills and deaths
Right.
spread out throughout the entire London Royal Ravens roster. And lo and behold, they make a finals.
Not to mention that Dylan played absolutely lights out this entire series. I
Yep.
like the plays that he was making were like, if this was happening during like COD champs, I don't see them, falling out of top 4. They played phenomenal this event. And this loss, this hard loss to Chicago, highlighted a couple of things that they do need to work on. But all in all, this is a huge success and great pick me up for the London Royal Ravens. I look forward to their continued success through the rest of the season because I do think that they have what it takes.
Yep, definitely. And you still look at kind of that end game scoreline and you look at that domination. If London had taken that domination, there's a very good likelihood that they would have taken this event. Chicago, they were undefeated in hardpoint. They were undefeated in hardpoint, 7-0 in hardpoint. All right, give that to them. They were phenomenal in that game mode. Phenomenal. London, they were 5-1 in S&D this event. They go to that game 5, very likely they could have taken it. And this is why that swing game mode is so damn important.
True.
Because
True.
that is your ticket to the game 5 if you're a solid S&D team. If you're a solid that's your ticket if you're a solid hard point team to win and not get that second S&D.
True.
And so that's why that swing game mode is just so important, especially for these teams that are looking incredibly solid in one game mode one weekend against a team that's incredibly solid in another game mode on that weekend. And so that's kind of a tale of two stories here with these lineups. Definitely going to be fun to watch these two rosters to see if they can keep up this performance or if it was just a honeymoon period and teams not really knowing what their map pool was or how this new team is really going to play. But I think we spent enough time on that, as I think we're getting into probably an hour and 20 minutes in the podcast. So we're going to move on to give our predictions for the Minnesota home stand, which is online, but I'm going to keep on calling them home stands. In our first matchup, we got Seattle Surge versus the Atlanta FaZe. All right, bye Seattle. It's a 3-0.
3-0, easy clap. Don't even have to talk about it. Maybe you should
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah, I
Oh,
mean, I imagine they're going to practice. I would hope they're going to, but even with practice, Atlanta's been the better team all year than Seattle. That's going to stay true. Like even if Seattle, like at best, Seattle is going to get a map at best. But
I think it is important to note before we continue much further because the rest of these actually matter, except for any time that Seattle plays. I digress. So there is going to be a change to the gentleman's agreement. It will be happening. I'm not sure if it's going to be an official ban, but with CDL, it's the same. It's viewed as one and the same. The talks are something's going to happen with the MP5. Something's going to happen with auto sprint, tactical sprint, whatever you may have it.
it's the Merc foregrip, isn't it, for the MP4?
I've heard of them banning the Merc foregrip for the MP5 or
My
banning
bad,
10 mil.
MP5. Yeah.
You're fine. And or banning 10 millimeter rounds. Now I'm in the circle where they should ban the 10 millimeter rounds, so that way you aren't using an AR on a map, and then it can bring in more guns to the play like MP7.
Can you explain kind of the difference between those two scenarios between why people want to ban the Merc and why people
Yeah.
want to ban the 10 mil? I kind of understand the 10 mil after I forget who put out the graphic for it, but I saw the graphic for it where it was, okay, you have the assault rifle at these ranges, it kills in 4 bullets. At this range, it kills in 5 bullets. In this range, it kills in 6 bullets. When you had the 10 mil on the MP5, which is an SMG,
Right.
there's a short range where it kills in 3 bullets.
Mm-hmm.
So it's already better than an AR. That makes sense. Okay, it's an SMG. Understandable. Then the range that it kills at 4 bullets matches that of the AR, and
Yep.
then the rest of the time it kills in 5 bullets at any range, which is absurd since it's an SMG and not an AR. There is damage fall off.
No, and that's the big issue is that I believe that it should be an SMG. Yes, an SMG should have a pretty good hip fire, but I think that if you ban the 10 millimeter rounds, the hip fire isn't as bad. It goes back to a normal like SMG hip fire. I think that's important for your sub players to have the hip fire as a capability, even if it is kind of accurate. Merc foregrip does make it scarily accurate, but what makes the MP5 fearsome is the 10 millimeter rounds. I think that you almost certainly have to ban it in light of everything. It will make significant waves in the way all these teams start playing. I would see like I would definitely call on an MP7 resurgence or well an MP7 rise because I think that that gun would definitely be a meta gun if it wasn't for 10 millimeter rounds on the MP5. I think that you'll see a lot of different changes to it. You might even see like the Kilo or the M13 making plays, almost like a Maddox was last year. So all that considered, the MP5 will see a change moving forward. They're talking about snaking, and I don't know how in the world they're gonna do anything with snaking. I just like
It's kind of going to be the same, I think, as it was in IW, where players just don't do it. But like this could be like a big topic elsewhere, but I do want to cover it in this because like snaking just shouldn't be a thing in the game at all. It amazes me that this is still an issue. We had this issue in IW, which was an Infinity Ward game. Why the hell is this still an issue in their next game? Like they should know that this is a mechanic that players can abuse and will abuse because it gives them an advantage. So like why the hell is this still something in the game? You know how to fix it, so just fix it, damn it. Like come on. Did we have this issue in Black Ops 4?
no, we
No, we
now
didn't.
we had some other things
We had some other things, yes,
like
but
shot punch was pretty overpowered, and there was some other like some other like
there were some other things, but they weren't just things that were frustratingly annoying and just stupid to play against, to my knowledge. Like shot
yeah
punching, yes, it's disgusting because you can one bullet a person and then instantly beat them down, and it's pretty instantaneous, yes. But you can't even push someone snaking.
yeah, that's true. So yes, I agree that there should be some sort of GA to it.
There shouldn't need to be a GA to it though. That's like the point. It shouldn't be in the game. It shouldn't be something that can happen. It's been an issue in past CODs. Developers know about it. Stop making a shit game and just get rid of it entirely so players can't abuse it. Like things that players can abuse, just get rid of them. Stop making your game abusable. Like that's like my point.
yeah, I mean,
On the side of talking about the 10 mil, never, ever, ever, ever should an SMG be able to outgun an AR at range.
no.
And never, ever, ever should an AR be able to outgun an SMG at close range. That is the balancing act of running an SMG versus an AR. SMG wins at close range because of better mobility, faster damage output, and it loses to an AR at range because the AR is going to have less recoil because of a slower rate of fire and better range,
Yeah, no,
less
I
damage
agree.
fall off. Like these are the fundamentals of how to make a balanced game, and you constantly screw it up. Why? Because you made an overly complicated attachment system for no freaking reason.
I will say that I did like the idea coming into it, but
I love
now
the yeah, I
like
did. I love the idea coming into it, but now it's just like
there's
you have
just
all this stuff. You have way too many combinations. There's bound to be something that's just flat out
yeah,
broken.
exactly. How do you test it all? How do you know that's like
Well, the way you test it all is like you don't even need to test it all. They have all of the data. They made the stats for all these attachments. You should be able to like throw up an Excel sheet of all the guns, all the attachments they could run, pump out, okay, these are all the stats with all these different weapon attachments. Okay, these are all the damage fall off rates and everything. And like this is all stuff that they've programmed into the game. Therefore, you should be able to automate a way to ensure that shit like this doesn't happen.
yeah, I mean that's the whole reason why I think that the 10 millimeter round should be GA'd over the Merc 4 grip. If a if a sub has a really good, hip fire, then it's all fine and dandy in my eyes. Like, it's still probably not super great at distance because that's how hip fire should work. If it hip fire works, shoots lasers from close range, and all right, that's kind of OP, but I can deal with it. I can't deal with MP5s, shooting cross map, and you know just absolutely bodying M4s. You can't have that. It just doesn't shouldn't work. It like the first few times that it showed up in the CDL and people were showing it as a highlight, it was like, oh man, this is crazy. Look at this submachine gun that's shooting lasers across map and beaming the ARs out of power positions. And at first we were like, oh yeah, that's kind of nuts. And then it kept happening every single game, and then it was like, all right, hold on a second. Timeout. There's something wrong where we've just normalized this, and this shouldn't be an issue. What was a highlight in the beginning of the season is now just a everyday thing because that's just how the gun works now. So I think that the 10 millimeter rounds just need to go. It, it's the only one that makes the most sense out of all the GA pool currently. I think
Yeah.
the 10 millimeter rounds make sense. The auto tac sprint, I don't care personally.
Yeah, I'm
There's
not even sure what's the reasoning behind GAing that. I'm not. Is it just because it's like it makes the movement easier to abuse with like the sprint cancel double bunny hop or whatever?
Yeah, it like slide canceling's really really easy anyway. Like it's as simple as you are running and then you double tap your in your when you're doing tactical sprint, and then you just hop right back up and go right into tactical sprint. Auto tactical sprint just means that you save yourself a click of the left joystick, and you're just automatically sprinting like that. I think that it's helpful in CDL and the competitive style playlist. I think it's not super helpful in playlists like Warzone and stuff like that when you don't want to be like always auto sprinting. I think there are times where your auto tac sprint is not as good in other areas of the game. So I think that it's fine in my opinion. Not to mention that people complain about controller damage over time, and this is something that mitigates
Yeah.
it. I think that that's a viable thing, but this is also a GA. This is also something that, you know, it's for the CDL. These guys have money. They can afford to buy a $200 controller every event if they wanted to. So, you know,
Yeah, they could, but I'm not seeing like
no, I don't see
the
there's
extreme need for it. Yeah,
no.
I 100% agree. Ban the 10 mil,
The
ban the snaking or whatever it is.
or at least
Outside of that,
like be
yeah,
like, all right, cool, you're obviously abusing that, like map loss or something like that. Not the, oh hey, it's a 1v1 and you got tagged up and then you hopped into
yeah,
cover and then you popped out and peppered them or something.
or you can just get every player in the CDL to abuse the crap out of it. You can get teams to just not play for hills if they can't break it the first try and just make a mockery of the league because it doesn't matter, you're still getting paid. And just make a mockery of the league until these developers have to get their heads out of their asses and actually fit their broken shit. Because this is, I think, the first time where I've actively, like this past event, I actively heard casters saying, "Wow, look at those spawns. That's stupid."
Yeah.
And when it's at that point, it's time for you to do something about it as developers that own the league.
Yeah, I think that this
Warzone's out. It's been out. It's a success. You probably don't even need to add anything to the game. You don't even like need to change Warzone. You don't need to do anything for it for a good while, in my eyes. Like people like it right now. You screwed up the Google. I'll probably change that back and just keep it everything as it is and stop fucking shit up because that's all you seem to be doing. And
yeah,
fix the broken shit that you've neglected because you want to cash in on the money pit of Warzone.
I really 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 want to see this esports succeed, and it will only succeed if the developers are completely on board with making sure that the esport needs everything that they have. Like you
Yeah.
have to foster a good competitive environment, and this game has done anything but foster a good competitive environment. So,
Yeah, this would be like if the NFL during the Super, not during the Super, just during all the regular season games, gave the players deflated balls,
Tom
and just
Brady
be
would be in
like,
heaven.
okay, no, like I mean flat, like flat balls, and like here, play with this. That's pretty much what the COD community is playing with right now in competitive for this game.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel good. And I mean, there's been a lot of changes because there's been so many players that have said, "Yeah, no, I'm just gonna wait until the next Black Ops comes out because this is just not how this is supposed to be played, and it's obvious that the devs don't care." I mean, I'm one of those at this point now. I've definitely backed off on how much I play Modern Warfare, and now I play some Black Ops 4 again just because it's more fun, like it's a nice little break from just the silliness of Modern Warfare. I think that there's a lot that they need to fix. But anyway, I figured we would go ahead and get the GA discussion out of the way because I think that's
Yeah,
important for predictions for the next one. And with the GAs in mind, I already made all my picks. So, like,
yeah,
I'm not changing
and
anything.
I'll start going through mine, and you can add whatever 2 cents you kind of want to.
Yep.
But I'm pretty sure I'm going to be agreeing with you for kind of the most part on these, except maybe that Group A matchup. But the next matchup after we got through with the stomping of Seattle versus the Atlanta phase, the series after that is Dallas versus Minnesota. Minnesota's been looking on kind of like a decline potentially. I still do think they're a really good team. They played
Oh, for
incredibly
sure.
close series throughout this. However, this event they really do have something to prove. They really like I don't expect them to make it out of this group since they do have Atlanta, Seattle, and Dallas in their group as well. Obviously, though they should beat Seattle easily. That's besides the fact. But they have Atlanta and Dallas in their pool as well, and those are the two teams that we're putting in the S tier. And so, if they make it out of this group, Minnesota's definitely back in action, rocking in that A tier or B tier or wherever we had them. But
Yeah,
I think Dallas is going to take this over Minnesota. They've looked good. They've had a couple weeks to kind of prepare for this matchup. So I'm giving it to Dallas 3-2. You're giving it to Dallas 3-1. Probably more in that 3-1 camp. However, I have like some faith that Minnesota is going to get a bit of resurgence into this event since they have had two bad showings at the prior events. So that's why I'm going to say 3-2. But yeah, definitely think Dallas is going to take this one.
yeah. I mean, I don't have anything else to say about it. I think that Minnesota, yes, they need to if they make it out of groups here, they're very solid, but they're not gonna make it out of groups here.
Yeah, yeah. I do not think so either. But moving on to our first Group B match, it's the Toronto Ultra versus the LA Gorillas. LA Gorillas looked decent or okay-ish, I guess you could say, at that Seattle event, but they only beat Seattle. They had a good showing against the London Royal Ravens. However, that was London Royal Ravens' kind of first competitive match as a team, and who knows how much time they had to practice together. Toronto looked pretty darn good at that Florida event. They made it to a semifinals. They put up a strong showing against Optic Gaming, who made it to the finals. So I'm going to go with Toronto. You are as well. I'm going to say Toronto 3-1 over the Gorillas. I don't think we're going to see a repeat performance from Vivid
No, I
with
don't
kind
either.
of how hard he dominated in some of those hard points. And I think that's honestly why some of those series got dragged out as far as they did, was simply because you had a guy on the map that was dropping 44 and 19 or whatever the heck he was doing.
Yeah, I was dumb.
So
Oh,
I don't see that happening again, and that's why I'm going to say it's 3-1 for Toronto. Potentially, Gorillas could take a hard point, or they could take the S&D. It's going to be kind of interesting because both of these teams are looking like some of the more solid S&D teams. Obviously, we said Toronto, they have a losing record in S&D, but prior to the last event, they had the third best overall round win percentage in S&D. So
I
should
think
be
that
interesting.
this will probably be the most interesting out of the first four games that we watch, simply because I think it's the one that you're gonna see two teams that actually can compete with each other. Kind of go back and forth on it. Until then, I think that it's kind of a wash. Toronto has a chance to repeat into a semifinals, depending on how well they do against Florida. I think this is another opportunity for Toronto to go into the semifinals, but they will have to prove themselves in order to get there.
Yeah, this is definitely a group that Toronto could get out of. They're in a group with LA, Chicago, and Florida. Our next matchup is Chicago versus Florida. Both of us are giving that to Chicago 3-1. Florida did not look good at their homestand. Chicago looked really good at the last event. We'll see if that stays consistent. However, Florida's kind of, again, one of those teams that has kind of, I would say, an octane playstyle where you have Caesar Skies going off, dropping a 1.3 at events. And so I think we're at that point in the game where just that one player kind of going off and then all other players kind of baiting for them isn't gonna isn't gonna get you out of groups, isn't gonna be enough. So
Well, they already made the change from Mox to Wake,
yes,
and
yeah, that is something to bring up. They did sub out Mox for Awakening, so honeymoon phase for Florida. Who knows?
I don't think it's going to be enough in order and to beat the Chicago roster. At this point,
Yeah,
the Chicago
especially
roster,
I think Pristini's gonna want to really put the beat down on
oh,
Florida.
absolutely 100% correct there. I think that Pristini has a giant chip on his shoulder because they got rid of him. Plain and simple. They didn't even ask for a trade. They didn't do anything. They basically dropped his ass. And that, to me, if I was one of the best players in the world at Call of Duty, I would be absolutely pissed. I would be so mad. Not to mention to see the team fall apart while I was still an active sub on the roster, being one of the best players in Call of Duty. How? So I think that this is going to be one of those events where anytime Chicago and Florida meet up, it's there's going to be extra. There's going to be blood behind or fire in the hearts of the teams because there's something else going on. It's not just a game.
Moving on to our Group A winners round one, we're going to see the likes of Atlanta FaZe versus the Dallas Empire. You're going to give it to Atlanta 3-2 over Dallas. I'm actually going to go the other way. I'm going to give it to Dallas 3-1 over Atlanta.
Really?
Yeah. Yep. So I'm not. I don't think it's going to go a game five. If it does go a game five, I probably would have given it to Atlanta. However, Atlanta has said they still think they're not a great hardpoint team. And so that says they still have stuff to improve on, which I guess is good. However, kind of just how good Dallas was the last time we saw this matchup.
True.
And the amount of time that's been kind of like the separation between that event and this event is obviously a lot. That one happened, what, like 6 weeks ago would be at this point. But
Quite a long time ago. I
yeah,
th-
I'm just gonna have to give it to Dallas at this point in time. I think Dallas is just a bit the better team. I think Dallas has been looking better in the hard points than Atlanta, and so I'm gonna give it to them 3-1. I think either Dallas will take the first S&D or they'll take that Dom and they'll win both hard points. That's kind of the way I'm splitting it up. The Dom or the S&D is going to be whoever wins that will lose the other one. But I'm giving both of the hard points at this time to the Dallas Empire.
I think that's fair, and I think that the taking it to a game four, I think Dallas has the best opportunity to win because I think Atlanta is just strictly a better search team than Dallas. Not to say that Dallas is a bad search team. I don't
No,
think
they're the second, quote unquote, the second best S&D team in the league, at least if you look at their round win percentage. They're just 1% behind Atlanta. So
and I think that like right now Dallas has very little weaknesses in their roster. That being said, Atlanta is also one of those teams that has very little weaknesses in their roster. Regardless of what happens here, these two are the teams that are making it out of Group A. I don't see Minnesota making it out of Group A unless they have a lights out performance against either of these two teams.
yeah, well,
And
I mean, you look at the trend at homestand events. Dallas homestand event, Dallas played poorly. They made it to semifinals, but they fell out. Chicago's homestand event, Chicago made it to a semis, and then they got obliterated by Florida, I do believe.
I
Florida They played abysmal at their homestand event. Seattle, they played
Same.
even worse at their homestand event. Minnesota homestand event, what's going to happen? So it's the curse of the homestand events. That's what I'm standing by as of right now. If Minnesota plays poorly, like really poorly this event, it's the curse of the homestand events. That's what I'm going with.
Minnesota will play 3 games though. They will beat Seattle. I'm convinced.
We
But
pray. Otherwise, it really is the curse of the homestand events. Moving on to our winners round one for Group B. I have Chicago versus Toronto. You do as well. I'm going to say 3-2 Chicago over Toronto. Last time they played, it was a 3-2. I don't know. Something about this Toronto-Chicago matchup to me in my head and my heart just screams it's going to be a 3-2 for whatever wacky reason. You also have Chicago taking it, but you have it a 3-1. Definitely could be a 3-1. Either way, we both agree Chicago is going to take it in the end. And so I'm going to move on to our Group A losers round one, since I do want to kind of wrap this up, since I bet everyone's kind of tired of listening to us. This Seattle versus Minnesota. Yeah, I'm going to go Minnesota. I'm going to say 3-1 over Seattle. Seattle's just not looked good. Minnesota's looked decent. Not really too much to say there. LAG versus Florida. So this is going to be a difficult one for me. I'm going to say Florida takes it. But yeah, I was going to say they take it 3-2 over the Gorillas. However, the Gorillas have just been looked like a much better search team than Florida has.
I agree.
Florida's been looking pretty darn bad in search and destroy. If we go to kind of their match record in that, they're third worst S&D team in the league. We talked about the worst team being Seattle. We talked about the second worst S&D team being New York. Well, Florida here is your third worst with a 45.23 S&D round win percentage and an 8-14 overall map record in that mode. So not much hope for them to take a game 5. So I'm going to have to give it to Florida 3-1 over the Gorillas. This one definitely could be scary if Florida drops a single respawn.
True.
I don't think they win this series. So
yeah, I
it's
agree.
it's very iffy, because if LAG, if they just have one standout performance for one of their players, again, they definitely could take a respawn over Florida. So I almost want to give it to LAG 3-2 over Florida, but I'm going to have a little faith in Sky and Pharaohs and the new player coming into the roster that they'll be able to take it. And who knows, maybe with Awakening coming in, they'll shape up their S&D a bit as well. But
Yeah, you never know. So
Group A, losers round 2. Yeah, I'm going to have Atlanta versus Minnesota. You're going to have Dallas versus Minnesota. I'm going to say Atlanta takes it 3-2 over Minnesota. That's just kind of how these series have been going. As far of late, Minnesota has taken Atlanta to around game 5 both times. First time Atlanta took it, second time Minnesota took it. This time around, I'm going to give it to Atlanta. Dallas, I definitely think, well, we both had Dallas beating Minnesota the first time around. So, yeah, I would agree. Dallas will beat Minnesota the second time around. I don't think that's going to be a match that Minnesota, we're going to really see kind of one of those reverses where Dallas wins it the first time, loses it the second time. I don't think that's going to be the case this time around, simply just because Dallas isn't on the same level as Minnesota. They're above them. And so that,
I agree.
Yeah. Moving on to Group B losers round 2, it is going to be Toronto versus Florida. You're giving it to Florida. Well, it's not a rematch, is it? No, it's not a rematch. You're giving it to Florida over Toronto. I'm going to jump on a bit of the Toronto, maybe not hype train, but I'm going to at least sit down at the station to see if the hype train arrives for the Toronto Ultra. I'm going to give it to them 3-2 over Florida. I just can't see Florida taking both respawns off of the Toronto Ultra with how good they did look at that Florida homestand event.
I agree.
And then also taking the game 5 S&D off Toronto. Toronto's just been looking like one of those scary teams in S&D, and kind of scary throughout kind of the whole series. Unless you're definitively the better team than Toronto, they're going to be taking you all the way to a game 5, and more often than not, they're going to be playing that S&D incredibly close, if not taking it. So I'm going to give that to Toronto 3-2 over the Florida Mutineers.
Regardless, whoever wins or loses this one, well, whoever wins this one is taking a very, very short trip into Sunday where they have to face Atlanta.
Yes, they have to face, well, they have to face Atlanta for you. For me, they have to play Dallas.
Oh,
And
true.
either way, I do agree that's not a matchup you really want. I have Dallas versus Toronto. You have Atlanta versus Florida. I'm saying Dallas 3-2 or 3-1. I'm going to say 3-1 over Toronto. Last time these two teams played, it was pretty darn close, I do believe. I think it almost went to a game 5, but they were just short. But yeah, Dallas, Atlanta, both S-tier teams. Florida and Toronto, they're somewhere in the soup. The soup is starting to settle. You're seeing some teams, they're a bit heavier. They're not as buoyant. They're falling to the bottom of the soup. You see some teams, they're maybe forming that brothy layer on top of the soup.
Back to the
They're a little
soup.
more buoyant. So, but Toronto and Florida are somewhere in the soup. However, Dallas and Atlanta, they're the mouth eating the soup. So
The mouth eating the soup.
yeah, they're not a part of
Interesting.
it.
Yeah,
They're not a part of it.
they
So,
definitely are above the soup for sure.
what they're the spoon. I don't. They're the spork. I don't. Whatever utensil you want to give them.
Spork the hell. All right. So anyway,
Yeah. Moving on to our second
so you
semifinals.
have Atlanta, Chicago. I have Chicago,
Yes.
Dallas.
However, because I have Atlanta, Chicago, we're not going to see Atlanta, Chicago because we haven't seen this matchup yet. So somehow, some way, I guess
We're
we'll.
seeing Atlanta,
Yeah.
Chicago this weekend. I don't think there's any other way to split it. We will either see them in the semis like yours, or we will see them in the finals.
Yeah,
Um,
so that's where we're a bit different. I don't have Chicago beating Atlanta. You have Chicago beating Dallas 3-1. I'm going to have Atlanta beating Chicago 3-2.
which is fair
And
because that's exactly what I have in the finals.
yeah, that is what you have in the final. So if we see my turn, well, I guess we will see Chicago, but
Yours will
uh,
be
we
Atlanta,
will.
Dallas.
Yeah, mine will be Atlanta, Dallas. I can't give it to Chicago yet simply because we just saw them at an event. None of the top teams were there. At least neither Dallas or Atlanta were there. None of the S tier teams are there. We said Chicago's an A tier team, even with Gunless. We've said they were an A tier team.
I think
Since their homestand, they probably moved down to like a B tier. But with the resurgence they had at Seattle, they're back up to that A tier definitively, I would say, since they did win. But I can't give an A tier team a win against an S tier team
no.
in the
I
predictions
I understand
until they
that.
beat them in the matchup. And so that's why I'm going to say Atlanta beat Chicago this time around 3-2.
Well, I think the
Um,
other thing is, and this is where the GAs are going to kick in, is that Atlanta has always been a lot better at changing with the times and making, more efficient and more effective changes. And it has to do a lot with Crowder. But the other thing is that the entire roster is willing to do whatever it takes to take the win. Their eyes are on the prize the whole season. So with the GAs coming out, I'm not sure if Chicago will be as prepared as Atlanta. I'm sure that they're already preparing. I'm sure that the GA discussion has kind of settled down, and now they're just kind of waiting for the last few teams to have their piece, and it will be
yeah.
announced shortly. That being said,
Yeah, the two teams that were disagreeing, I think, with the GAs at the start were Dallas and Florida, and so there was some talk about potentially them being blacklisted from scrims, franchise league, ridiculously enough. But
right.
um, that could definitely have implications if that is true. I know we do have some incredibly good AM teams now, where I don't think they would lose too much from not being able to scrim some of the teams, especially since I don't know what the scrims look like, but I can't imagine Dallas is probably going to be scrimming either Atlanta or Chicago, at least leading up to this event. I don't think they would, but who knows, honestly. Um, doesn't leave them honestly too many teams to scrim against, so not a lot of options there. But that's definitely something I guess we'll have to keep in mind going into this event. However, in the grand final, I'm going to have Dallas, Atlanta. You're going to
Dallas
have
over
Atlanta, Chicago.
Atlanta.
And I'm going to say Dallas beats Atlanta twice this event. First time I gave it to Dallas 3-1 over Atlanta. The second time I'm going to give it to them 3-2 over Atlanta.
You know who I know is going to be completely lost and is going to have so much to work on after the GAs come out? Shotzi. Shotzi has been one of the most prolific players as far as movement goes, but the reason why he's been so successful with movement is because he snakes all the time. His auto attack sprints on, his MP5 is absolutely disgusting, and these GAs are going to impact players like Shotzi the most. I think that Clayster and Crim6 have been playing subpar. They have not lived up to their names as some of the greatest players to ever play Call of Duty. And it has been interesting to watch for sure. That being said, I'm not saying that Dallas still isn't one of the best teams in CDL. I've been saying that all podcast, so I can't change it now. But I would imagine that Atlanta would at least give Dallas a run for their money.
I don't think you can say Clayster and Crim6 have been playing subpar. I think they've been playing fine throughout
For
the entire
for
season.
players of their caliber is what I'm saying.
I mean,
For who Clayster and Crim6 are.
would you rather have them drop a 1.2 or would you rather have them win series? Because that's what they've been doing.
I think
And
you can have
I
both.
don't give, I mean, yeah, you can sometimes have both, but I would rather have them do their job. And if they feel like right now they're doing their job and they're winning with how they're performing, then I'm satisfied with that. Players don't win championships, teams do.
True. I don't disagree. That being said, I think that it will be interesting to see Dallas and Atlanta go at it, and they will for sure this weekend.
Yep.
But this is a big but here. I really don't think that Dallas has the kind of firepower to beat a team like Atlanta. They did it. They've done it before. They've taken the
They did
finals
it.
over Atlanta.
They beat Atlanta pretty convincingly in that final. And that's kind of the only reason we did say yes, okay, Atlanta looked crap at that event. We all agree that. Atlanta agreed with that.
Yes.
Atlanta looked a lot better at the Florida event. They won it. However, they didn't look as dominant as they had been at the beginning of the season. So what I'm going with kind of the eye test of how good Dallas looked at that Chicago event compared to how good Atlanta looked at the Florida event in their wins. And with that, I think Dallas definitively looked better in their wins at the Chicago event than Atlanta did in their wins at the Florida event. And that's why I'm saying Dallas is going to be able to beat Atlanta at this event. Now, it will be very interesting to see how the GAs or whatever blacklisting or whatever is banned plays into this, if it does. And I think that's something we can look at simply by looking at Shotzi's stats and maybe Illy's stats and how they perform at this event compared to how Atlanta performs at this event. If Illy has just a god awful event, then maybe we can put some stock in saying, okay, yeah, those GAs really affected him. He's going to have to learn how to play the game
True.
a bit differently. If we don't see a drop in his stats and we do see Atlanta beat Dallas, then we can definitively say Atlanta is the better team than Dallas.
All right.
And
I think that's
at
fair.
that point. And so that's why this event's going to be super fun to watch. We have Dallas, we have Atlanta, we have Chicago, we got Minnesota. And then we got
Seattle.
well, I wasn't even going to mention Seattle. We got Toronto and we got Florida, who can be a bit of a dark horse at times. So got the top 4 teams in CDL points at this event. Should be incredibly exciting, incredibly fun. I hope you all enjoy your weekend. Watch the event. I know I will be, and we'll see you guys next time.
Later. Now my record button's working. Okay. That was fucking stupid.
All right. Good.
Yeah.
Recording. See highs and lows, ups and downs.
Yes. There are
Alrighty.
sounds being made.